Today we are having a special conversation with Kyle Scheele. Kyle was the author, or well, he
What?
is. It's not. He's not.
This past
He's,
tense?
he's discontinued as author. He is an author of many things, but he's also the author of this new book. He's a speaker. He's a cardboarder who has challenged tens of thousands of students across the nation to build a better world. He lives with his wife and kids in Missouri and has done all kinds of amazingly weird stuff. We say that in the best way possible. He's held a fake marathon,
which we participated in.
The only
Thank you very much.
To this day, the only marathon I've ever participated in.
I'm still winded.
He got 37,000 people to sing "Don't Stop Believing" with him on a speaking
video.
tour,
oh
and
gosh.
he built at least one Viking ship out of cardboard. I think he's done two. He did a bigger one, and then burnt it down in his yard. So. Kyle, how are you today? Thank you so much for being a part of our show tonight. How's it going?
I'm good. I don't want to make you guys jealous, but I live just like an hour away from the home of Precious Moments.
Oh,
so
we have
your mom has probably been to the Mecca here. They have a whole chapel and everything.
Remind me the name?
Carthage.
Yes.
Carthage, Missouri.
Missouri. That's right.
Yeah, we took a road trip there with her.
Yes,
one time.
we went with my parents and my grandmother.
That was a fun trip.
One for the ages.
Yeah.
It sounds like a real party.
Here's the book, Pizza with Everything on it.
Before we get to this, can we fact check? Did you make 2 Viking ships?
I have made 2 Viking ships. Yeah.
And the second one was much larger, right?
Yeah, the first one was large. The first one was 16 feet long and 8 feet tall, and the second one was 16 feet tall and 30 feet long.
Whoa. Okay.
So.
Yeah, that's crazy. And they at least the biggest one got burned. Did this first one get burned?
We both got burned. The first one was for my birthday. When I turned 30, I had a Viking funeral for my 20s. And then that kind of turned into this whole thing where it just started as a joke of mine, and then some friends of mine made a video about the process because I went into great detail on this ship. I hate these kind of things because I can't show you pictures of it, but whenever I say I make stuff out of cardboard, I think people assume it's like a kid's craft project, but it's very intricate and detailed. And so I made this whole thing, and in that video I talked about like wanting to let go of things from my 20s and move on to my 30s, and that seemed to inspire a lot of people. And so I got all these emails from people saying like, I want to let go of some stuff from my past. And they would always kind of end with saying, like, I just wish I had a cool Viking funeral like you did. So I was like, okay, well, how about I'll do that part, and you just send me the thing that you want to let go of. So the second one was a Viking funeral for the people we used to be. So I had people send me in a regret or a mistake or something from their past. And in the end, we had 21,000, and I think it was 21,089 submissions from in like 4 different languages from people all over the world. And we set the whole ship on fire.
And that was pretty emotional, wasn't it, for some people? Like, it was a really cool.
Oh yeah, I mean, I cried like a baby. So it was it was a pretty emotional thing. And I mean, people sent in stuff from, some people would write one word that they, something that they wanted to let go of fear, or they wanted to let go of anger or something. And other people, I mean, would just pour out their heart, like front and back, covered in text on their submission. So. It seemed to. I got tons of notes from people saying that the whole thing, while very strange, was really helpful for them in some way. So
yeah, very cool. Well, one thing that I've always admired about you is you are a very creative person, and we're hoping to have Andy on as well, who co contributed to this book. He was the illustrator, you were the author, but both of you fit into this category of very creative people who are, you like Andy is an illustrator, but he does more than just that. And you are a speaker and an author, but your creativity comes out in a lot of different ways, just like what we've just got done talking about. And I've always admired that it doesn't have to just be one medium. It's like, hey, this is a cool idea, let's do it. But a children's book feels like this. How did this not happen sooner? It's a much more traditional, I guess, medium, I suppose, but not an easy thing by any means. So tell us a little bit about how this came to be. I know it's been a dream of yours for a while. How did it come to be? And
so I wanted to write kids' books. I mean, really, like when I was a kid, I wanted to write kids' books. And I was always writing stories and you realize later looking back that you were just ripping off like Goosebumps and Animorphs and stuff like that. But at the time I thought like, I'm really breaking some new ground here. And I would bring, like, I remember I would bring stories into like the bowling alley and like show the guy who was there, like, hey, would you read this? And did that for a long time. And then kind of, middle school and high school, got away from it a little bit. And then in college, just started having people just sort of like call this out of me. Like people that I knew would go like, you're a writer, right? And I was not majoring in English. I was not like, I didn't think of myself as a writer, but for some reason, other people started seeing this in me. And then somebody invited me to a writing group. And so I was like, you know what? I might want to get back into this kids book writing thing. And I started doing it. I was working on some projects and like actively like really pursuing that. And then I made the mistake of Googling like, how do you become a kids book writer? Because I had several chapters of like a kids chapter book done, and everything that I read was just like the most depressing thing in the universe. And it was people saying like, well, yeah, you can, good luck even getting an agent, and you'll never get an agent. And even if you do, you might hate your agent. Even if you love your agent, they won't be able to sell your book. And like, it was basically just like the first step that you have to take is 2 miles high, and then it only gets harder from there. And everything I read was just like so just depressing that I'm sort of ashamed to admit this, but I just gave up on that whole dream. I basically was like, well, this is obviously not going to happen. And so I went off and I did this whole other career, and I started speaking, and I've done that for 11 years now. And then, about halfway through that, I met Andy, who's the illustrator for this book, and we just became really good friends. He was he's an artist who's trying to get into the speaking world at the time, and now is in the speaking world. And I was a speaker who was trying to, kind of go more into the art world. And so we sort of were like, hey, we can just share maps of where we've been and help each other out. And at some point I mentioned to him this idea that I had for a kid's book, and he was like, oh, I would love to work on that with you. And so we kind of started batting it around, and then, all these years later, it turned into this book. And so, I mean, I can go into as much or as little detail as you want, but I will say that what I ended up finding out was that all of those things that people said were not true for me. So like, I never actually even submitted this book to an agent. Like through a random series of events, an agent found out about it, and she pitched me on like, can I represent this book? And then not only that, but like, she's great. Like I love my agent. And I had read all these horror stories about people who like had really kind of cantankerous relationships with their agents. I love my agent. She's great. She's amazing. And then, our book sold within the first round. We had multiple offers on our book. It like went to auction. Like all the bad stuff that people said was going to happen, none of it happened. The entire process, I know this is not everyone's experience, but the entire process has been an absolute joy. I love my editor. I love my agent. I love my publisher. Like everyone's been super great. And so I only say that to say like, I made the mistake of letting someone else talk me out of pursuing this dream. And it turned out those people were wrong, at least in my case. And so if somebody's watching this and you're in the position of like, oh, I wanted to pursue this thing, but I don't know, and people are telling me it won't work. Like maybe they're right, but maybe they're not. And you're not going to know, unless you give it a shot.
That's such a good reminder, isn't it? And there is something, that adultitis, like that we talk about, that it sounds like that was all over that Google search, right? Of people are like, and for whatever, I'm sure that was their experience, because it's not always smooth sailing, but it's neat that it came back around for you. Like it was meant to be, right?
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, I think certainly not to invalidate anyone's experience, like that probably was their experience. But the thing is, it's sort of the thing where most people don't go leave reviews for, a product that does an okay job for them. If they love it, then they'll review it. And if they hate it, then they'll review it. So a lot of times if something's just like, oh yeah, this is kind of what I expected, then you go look at them, all you're going to see are the really good reviews and the really bad reviews. And so, I had already seen the really good reviews of being a book, an author, when you see like, oh, this person hit the New York Times list, or they're a multimillionaire or whatever. But then all I was seeing was people who had been kind of chewed up and spit out by the process. And some of those people might have had legitimate complaints. Some of those people might have thought they had legitimate complaints, and maybe their story wasn't that good, or maybe they were hard to work with, or delusional or whatever. But you'd never see, like I wasn't seeing all of the people who are like, yeah, I published a book and it went pretty well. And like those people were just working and, getting more things done, not hanging out on forums for people who wanted to be children's books writers. So I think there's sort of this selection bias where you're looking at something that's this big, but that's all you're seeing. So you assume that like that's the whole universe of experience, and it's just not true.
Yeah. Were you and Andy, you guys were kind of like a package deal? It's one thing that I've heard a lot of times is if you're not also the illustrator, that a lot of times the publisher will want to pick an artist to go with it. Is that true? I mean, obviously you guys.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And the interesting, this is another just, again, this is just my experience, but we did almost everything wrong. Like everything that you're supposed to do, we did not do that. And so the way that an author who's not an illustrator would traditionally pitch a book is like, you would basically sell a Word document. And you're like, this is my story. And maybe some notes on like, hey, here's kind of some ideas of how it would work. But then the publisher wants to have their fingerprints on it. They want to be able to say like, oh, we connected it with this illustrator and we made those decisions. And a lot of times, like, this is what's pretty wild. I didn't know this, but I've talked to illustrators and authors who they weren't allowed to talk, or they were like kind of discouraged from talking during the process. Like the publisher didn't want that cross-contamination. And so Andy and I went in knowing that there would be some publishers who would opt out simply because we came as an attached deal. But when at the beginning of this, you said something about Andy was the co-author, and then you're like, well, he was the illustrator, but that's kind of true. Like this whole thing, like I didn't draw any of the pictures, but like I had input on the illustration and he had input on the story, and so it kind of felt like neither one of us really owned it enough to say like, well, I'm gonna go sell this. Like it was a package deal, and the other thing that we did was we didn't just put together, here's a Word document and here's a couple pictures. Like, I mean, we made a whole pitch deck of here's like Andy drew a cover for the book and we mocked it up on a Photoshop of like a real book. It looked like a real book. And then that we made, here's the whole like storyboard of the entire thing with thumbnails for every page. He did a couple full color spreads. We even did we made a marketing plan. We made a chart of like, here's what kids will like about this book. Here's what adults will like about this book. Here's what everyone will like about this book. Like we really sold it hard. And that's, I don't think that that's traditionally done that much. And so yeah, I mean, like I learned that when I was in high school, I had a t-shirt company selling t-shirts out of the back of my car. And I decided that I wanted to get t-shirts sold in Urban Outfitters. And I called their like headquarters, which I don't even know how I found their number. And I asked them like, how would I do this? And they basically told me like, if you don't have someone's specific name, like in the buying department, we won't answer your mail. We won't open anything. Like it's kind of like you have to know somebody to know somebody thing. And I just thought that won't be true. Like if you mail them something cool enough, they'll open it. And I made this whole package that was like a suitcase, and it opened up and there was all this kind of cool stuff in there. I was like, you're going to open a suitcase if someone mails it to you and it has your name on it. And that ended up with me getting my t-shirts sold in Urban Outfitters all over the country and one store in Canada, which technically made me an international fashion designer. So I don't know. I just learned this lesson of like, don't say no for the other person. Like, don't just assume the answer is going to be no. But also, even if they say, oh, we don't usually do this, like, just go like, oh, I bet if I try hard enough, you might do it. So, yeah, that really helped us out.
Is he turning into Forrest Gump, by the way?
A little bit, yeah.
Every time he tells a story about your life, we're like, what? You're an international fashion designer now?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Kyle, tell us a little bit about the book. I mean, it's a children's book, so it's not like it's 75,000 pages long. But give people for those of you who are just tuning in, because I know some people are just jumping in here live. Yeah. We're talking with Kyle Scheele, who's the author of Pizza with Everything on It, just released in the last week or two. And tell us a little bit about what the premise of the book and where the story came from. Is there any sort of autobiographical? What's the word?
Autobiographical.
There you go.
You know it.
Genesis of this.
Yeah. So my friend Scott says that I am a hyper literalist, and he always makes fun of me for taking things way too literally. And so like I'm not like, I know there are some people who like, that's just their default. They go there and they have like a hard time understanding the not literal part. Like I'm not that. Like I understand when people say I want a pizza with everything on it, they don't literally mean they want a pizza with everything on it. But that's the first place that my brain goes, and I laugh about that. And so several years ago, I have a habit of, I always carry a notebook with me. I have a notebook in my back pocket right now. I have buckets of notebooks back here from years past. And I've just developed this habit of like, anytime an idea strikes me as funny or interesting, or it maybe has some potential, I write it down. And so 6 years ago, I had this idea for a kid's book that was called A Pizza with Everything on It. And I thought it would be interesting to see, a kid who wants to make a pizza with everything on it, and he's taking that literally and his father is not. That was the kind of origin story for this book. But the problem was I didn't really know how to resolve that. And I kind of like, I started working on it and I thought, okay, well, eventually, this pizza is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Then what? Like, I didn't have an answer for that. And I had sort of at one point thought like, oh, maybe the pizza like falls over and it flips over and the crust lands on the ground. And then it's like, well, now the whole world's on the pizza. But I thought, it's kind of really a complex concept to explain to a child and to illustrate. And it wasn't satisfying.
It's not landing. Yeah.
And so I thought like, I don't know, I just kind of put it in a drawer for a couple years and it would kind of keep coming back up from time to time. And I was like, I don't have an ending for this story. And then Andy and I were talking one day and he was telling me about some different things he was doing. And I was like, man, you need to do kids books. I was like, your illustration style is so kid friendly and it's colorful and it's creative and cool. And he was like, man, I'd love to do one. And then I don't know why I knew it's another piece of advice. It's generally a bad idea if you know an illustrator to go, I have an idea for a kid's book, because what you're basically saying is like, I'll do 1 day of work and you'll do 6 months of work. Like, and so I don't know why, but like, I just knew Andy and I had an established relationship where I was like, he can tell me to get lost. And I would be like, okay, he could be like, no, dude, you're being dumb. Like, I'm not going to do this. And I would listen to him. But so I just said, hey, I had this idea for a book. And he actually, the funny thing was he said, he goes, man, I had an idea for a book about an everything bagel, but I ran into a similar problem. I couldn't figure out the ending of it. And so I said, well, let's chew on it, and think about it. And then I made this joke where I said, well, the only other thing I could think of is that eventually the pizza gets so big, it collapses in on itself, forms a black hole and sucks everything in. And I was like, but that's a pretty depressing end to a children's book if all of the characters die. And he kind of laughed and we just like went our separate ways. And then that kind of just stewed in my brain for a couple of weeks. And then one day out of nowhere, I was like, a pizza big bang. And I was like, that's how you get out of that, is like after a black hole sucks everything in, then there's a pizza big bang. The universe reforms out of pizza now, and everything is made out of pizza. And which kind of brings it back around to the title, A Pizza with Everything on It. And once I had that, I called him right away and I was like, I solved our problem. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, pizza big bang. And then I just hung up the phone. And I banged out the story that day. And that pretty much is the story that's in the book now. That was 4 years ago. So I had the idea 6 years ago. 4 years ago, I wrote the story. Then Andy and I spent about a year and a half, 2 years in between other projects, putting together the pitch deck, him drawing the pictures. And then we gave it to our agents and they sold it to Chronicle. And that's the crazy thing about the kids book world, or the book world in general, is a publisher will go, oh my gosh, we love this so much. We're so excited about it. We can't wait to put it out in 2 years. And so that was 2 years ago. And then the book came out April 27th.
Wow. I will say, when we were reading it for the first time with the kids, I was like, where is this going? Like, how is this going to end? So it's funny to hear that backstory now, because there is that moment of like, I don't know how this comes to some conclusion. So it made sense.
Well, it's amazing to me too how a children's book, which by definition usually doesn't have very many words, could be so much in your voice. Like, I could hear your voice, like, everything on it, everything.
I know.
I could totally get that vibe. What is your favorite part of the book? Like, is there a illustration or a part of the phrasing that you love?
I'll answer that in the micro and the macro. So, like, in the actual, I'll start with like the macro, like the big picture of the book that I didn't really like. It took Andy pointing this out to me. The thing that I like about the book is that it's the overall theme of the book. While it seems like very silly on its face, and I generally, like, my agent is always trying to get me to write books that are like have some kind of really strong moral message to them, because I'm a motivational speaker, and she's like, oh, that'd be a great tie-in. And I'm like, I hate those books so much. I'm so allergic to any book that's like, and then that's why you should be kind. Like, if it's just in your face like that, I hate it. And so it's funny because I just thought of this as like pure silliness, pure like ridiculous story. And it took Andy pointing out like, well, what this book is actually about is a dad who says yes to his kid. And it's about those moments in like a parent-child relationship when a parent stops being an adult for a minute. Like, I mean, this is perfect for you guys. And stop saying like, well, who's going to clean this up? Or this is unreasonable, or this is like, and they just kind of like go yes and to their kid. And I was like, that is what this book is about. And I never made that connection. And so there's this kind of like really heartfelt parent-child thing that happens in the book. And basically like there's this kind of refrain that repeats itself where the dad says, what do you want to do? The kid says, I want to make a pizza with everything on it. They kind of make a pizza like this what you would think of as a supreme pizza. And the dad goes, perfect. And the kid goes, no, Dad, I want a pizza with everything on it. So they add more stuff to it. The dad goes, perfect. And the kid goes, no, I want a pizza with everything on it. And then at the end, there's this huge explosion and a big bang, and the universe is made out of pizza, and they fly through a pizza earth into their pizza town and stuff. And then at the end, the dad looks at the kid and he's like, and it says, perfect, he said, a little unsure. And then the very last page of the book is the dad and the son hugging, and it just says, perfect. And so that moment is like really, it's just this very heartfelt end to this like silly story. And it's funny because the book actually doesn't resolve. Like I had a friend that pointed out, they're like, man, because the dad owns a pizza shop in the book, and they're like, man, he really hurt his business here. Like he really upended the supply and demand curve. If he owns a pizza shop and he just made the whole universe out of pizza, now like there's a lot of problems that this leads to. And so but it's sort of like, and Andy kind of sums that up, and he's like, yeah, it's all okay though because they're together. Like whatever problems they have with their pizza universe, it's okay because he's with his dad. So that's kind of like the big picture stuff I like. But in terms of little tiny things that I like, it's not even in the story, but at the very end of the book, where there's the
I love this.
The copyright page, I got them to change the copyright notice. So I mean, it's Chronicle books, so they're like a huge publisher, and they have lawyers and all these things. And I had this idea. I was like, hey, I changed copyright notice. And at first I thought, oh, I didn't even ask. They're going to say no. And then I remembered that piece of advice that I said earlier that someone had given me once, which was don't say no for the other person. And so I was like, well, I'll just ask them. And they kind of like laughed about it. And they're like, oh, well, we'll ask our lawyers. And the lawyers came back and were like, yeah, that's fine. So the copyright notice in this book says, all rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form, baked into a pizza, or used to destroy and or recreate the universe without written permission from the publisher. So I love that little Easter egg that's in there, and I just love that they let us put that in there.
Yeah.
That's quite adultitis fighting win
good
right
little
there,
Easter egg.
right? The lawyers said yes. Like that is amazing.
I'm envisioning, how like they do like a movie rights of like a book, especially a kid's book, and then they turn it to be like almost nothing like it. Like I'm envisioning an Inception style movie based on this book that's totally over the heads of kids, but it's just like this special effect kind of a thing. I think that'd be pretty rad.
It would be amazing.
By the way, if you are watching right now and have a question for Kyle about anything he's talked about or anything about children's books or what he's been doing, what he's been up to, put it in the chat, and we'll make sure we try to ask a few before we get done here.
And I'm not sure if Jenna put up in the link to Kyle's just speaking page. If that's something you can do, Jenna, it might be up there.
I think she may have. She's been putting a lot of links.
We've talked about that you're also a professional speaker, which is how our paths crossed, I believe. And Ryan Hack is in the comments, so if you want to give him any heck, I believe we have some shared.
Oh, I love Ryan Hack.
Together.
He's the best.
Yes, it's good people here.
I don't know if Ryan connected us, or I think Ryan connected us, or maybe we independently connected and then found out we knew Ryan. I don't know, but Ryan's definitely a part of the Kyle and the Katekis, which sounds like a band.
It was part of the Story Conference.
Yeah, that
right?
could
be.
In
Chicago, we were with Ryan, and I believe you had your Penny Farther. or what am I picturing?
Penny far thing?
Yeah. Did you have that in Chicago? Did you bring that?
No, I had some other weird bikes. I think I had the tandem bike there.
Okay.
But I didn't have a penny farthing. I wish I would have brought a penny farthing to Chicago. That would have been amazing.
I'm like, how would you have gotten it there? That there's some questions, but anyway.
What's your favorite kids book of all time, Kyle?
Ooh.
Oh man, I actually have a tattoo from. I have my own kids book tattoo, this is really kind of a tribute to Andy. But I have another tattoo from this book, which is called The Wolf, the Duck, and the Mouse, which is Mac Barnett and John Clausen are like, I will buy anything that those two ever work on together or separate for the rest of their natural lives. They're amazing. And The Wolf, the Duck, and the Mouse is this book. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's about a wolf who eats a mouse. And the mouse is kind of like despairing. He's inside the wolf. And he basically is like, woe is me, life is over. And then he hears this voice that says like, be quiet, I'm trying to sleep. And it's a duck that has also been eaten by the wolf. And it essentially is just like this duck and this wolf, or this duck and this mouse are inside this wolf, and they like decide to have a party, and like, and the duck says like, it's not really so bad in here. Like, when I was out there, I was always afraid of being eaten by a wolf, but in here, like, I don't have to worry about that. And, there's like at one point they have a table and there's like a candle and they're like, a record player, and the mouse is just like, where did you get all this stuff? And the duck just says like, oh, you'd be surprised at what you can find inside of a wolf. It's just like pure absurdity. And then, and then they kind of like, I'm just going to tell the whole story. The mouse and the duck are having this party, and it makes the wolf sick because they're dancing around inside. And the wolf is like moaning and miserable. And they yell up from inside the wolf. They say like, oh, I know a cure that's sure to help. Send down some beeswax candle and a flagon of wine. And then like, they have this whole party. And so it's just, and then at the end, the wolf, he's so sick, he gets trapped in this, like, in a root, and a hunter comes after him. And then that's what this scene is from, is the mouse and the duck, they're like, we have to save the wolf. And so it says something about, it's like, tonight we ride to defend our home. And then and they just come flying out of this wolf's mouth, attack the hunter, and save the day. I love that book so much. It's incredible. But I mean, that's one of many. Really, anything those two put out is incredible. They have another book called Sam and Dave Dig a Hole that is absolutely brilliant. They are like the kings of absurdity and also heart. Like their stories all have this kind of core of heart that you wouldn't think of if you were, just having someone describe them to you.
Very cool.
It totally makes sense to me that would be your favorite book, because that really lines up with how I associate your creativity, like the absurdity, right? Mm-hmm. And you obviously, that's kind of when our lives crossed, which Ryan points out, we were sharpening pencils. Ryan, that's oddly
might have
the
been
fact that you
pencils.
Remember that. I think we were sharpening pencils, and we were when we met you.
Yeah, well, because I think Kyle was sharpening them, and we were like,
I made the Sharpertron 9000, which was like an artisanal pencil sharpener. Yeah. It was like a crank. It was made from an old manual drill press and a bunch of different parts. And I had I engraved a plaque that said Sharpertron 9000. Yeah, that's what it was. And I had an apron full of pencils.
Yep.
Oh, man. See, this is what I'm talking about. I think once we figured out that that's what you do, then it really piqued our curiosity, because that's what it was. There's so much curiosity when you get to know Kyle Scheele of like, what are you doing next? What is he doing? He's doing a fake marathon? He's bearding babies? Like, what is all this? What is this? Like, right? I mean, is there any like favorite project of yours that you look back on and you're like, I think I was most proud of this, other than like obviously the big epic Viking ships and whatnot, but is there anything else?
Honestly, no, they all like, somebody asked me, I've been asked before in interviews, like, what's your favorite thing that you've done? And it's always like whatever the last thing is that I did, like whatever the most recent thing, or whatever. Actually, it's either that or it's the thing I'm working on currently. And so there are like some things right now that I'm not allowed to talk about contractually, but that are very, very fun and exciting and weird, and that will be coming out probably later this year. And so, yeah, and it's always just the thing that I'm working on now, or the thing that I just finished, that's like top of mind. And I'm actually really bad at getting mileage out of things. Like once something's done, like I should do a better job of talking about it for a while, and I don't do that, and I like immediately move on. And I've just recently, like this year, accidentally built this big TikTok following, and I've been trying to like share more of my past projects with those people. And I'm realizing like, oh, I should do a better job at talking about this stuff because most of these people haven't heard of this stuff and they love it. So the one that comes to mind is like I had a tandem bicycle, which you guys probably saw, but it would have just been a tandem bike at the time. And then I chopped the butt off of it, or chopped the back seat off of it, and put a horse's butt on the back. Like I made a horse's butt out of cardboard, and it moved and everything. The legs moved. And so when you sat on it, it looked like you were a centaur. And so it was just, and when you would ride around, the back legs of the horse would move with the pedals. So it looked like all four legs of the centaur were pedaling. And I made that 7 or 8 years ago, I think 7 years ago. And I posted a video about it recently on TikTok, and I think it has 8 or 9 million views now. And Pee Wee Herman tweeted about it, and it blew up, and this whole thing happened. And I was like, oh yeah, like that's a thing I did a long time ago. So I don't know. It's always some weird project, and I'm mostly always just trying to think of like, okay, what's the next one? What's the next weird thing that I can do?
Rachel says, I saw that. I didn't realize it was you.
Yeah, that was me.
People. We've got Steven just ordered the book, so that's nice. Good. Yay. Glad to hear that.
All right. Thank you, Steven.
Pizza with everything on it. It's everywhere books are sold, right? I think that's probably fair to say, right?
Where would you like
that? Yeah, and like it's funny because Chronicle tweeted something about it, and they said that, and you guys know how this is. Like when you have something that you've worked on, and like a lot of times you don't even really get to take a breath and enjoy the thing because you're like making the thing, and then you're like planning to market the thing, and then you're marketing the thing. And one of my friends had to like stop me, and he was like, Kyle, this tweet says everywhere books are sold. He's like, just breathe that in for a second. He's like, that's amazing. And it's not even true. Like it's available, like bookstores can order it. But even just that, he's like that. He goes, I've never had anything that's available everywhere books are sold. And so I was like, yeah, every time that phrase comes up and somebody says that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool thing to be able to say.
And you'll experience this too in like 6 months or a year. You'll go to a library. If you go to a random library, you'll see your book in the library, which is cool. Especially yours with the children's books. I'm sure you're going to get some great play there. So it's exciting. That distribution is pretty awesome.
It's very cool.
Well, and if anyone has been watching this whole time, I know Kyle is not into the motivational book market, but he's dropped some pretty good wisdom bombs on all of you. That last one, just the idea of appreciate how far you've come, because every single one of you watching, hell, in this last year, like how far you've come from what happened when the lockdown happened and all the things we've learned and the ways we've grown. So I know that's for me. I need to be reminded of that a lot. Yeah. We also suck at marketing things. It's like we make it, we tell people, and it's like, okay, we're moving on. And it's a kind of a fatal flaw, I guess. But
I think it goes with the creative spirit where you're just ready to make again. So that's part.
Well, Austin Kleon talks about that. He had a tweet or a blog post one time. He said execution is execution. He said once you execute something, it's like you've it's like you've killed it and it's dead to you as an artist, and you move on. And I've thought about that a lot. Like, oh yeah, that's true. Like as soon as I finish something and it's out in the world, I'm like, that's the first time other people want to talk about it because they've just heard about it. And I'm like, I'm done with that. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. My wife, when this book came out, like, I mean, the month leading up to book, you guys know this, is just like crazy. Like you're trying to do everything that you can to get pre-orders and drive sales. And I mean, you're just begging every person you've ever met to buy this book if they have kids or don't have kids, if they hate kids. I was telling people, I don't even care if you burn the book. Like do whatever you like. I just need to move copies of this. And then, my wife and I it was like a week before the book came out. And she was like, wow, Tuesday, the next Tuesday, she's like, that's like the end of it and she goes, I keep thinking of it as the end, but really, she said that she was like, it's really the beginning. Like nobody has even read this book yet. But for us, it's been, depending on how you frame it, 2, 4, 6 years of this process to get this out. And this is the first time anybody's ever heard of it. And I'm already like, I'm done talking about it. So I have to keep reminding myself like, no, I told my publisher I would keep talking about it. So I'm going to keep talking about it. But yeah, it's very easy to not kind of get it across home plate or whatever. And you have to force yourself to do that.
Yeah. Well, you guys have 4 kids now, right?
Yes.
I can't imagine how excited they were to get this in their hands. That must have been.
Oh, they're so excited. Yeah, they love it. And it's dedicated to them. So in the front of the book, like they just love, and they were like asking me, they were like, is this just in our book? And I was like, no, this is in all of the books all around the world have your name. And they were like, no way. Like they were so stoked about it.
Oh yeah. That's awesome. Aww, that's so cool.
Well, I think I don't know if we shared this on the show. I obviously haven't shared this with Kyle, but when you were talking earlier about the dad saying yes to the kid, and there is that moment in the book where he kind of like throws everything to the wind and is like jumps in with them. It reminded me of, we went to a zoo about a month ago, and we heard a mom overheard a mom say to her kid, "Put that stick down. We have sticks at home."
But so just good. There's the opposite, right? Yeah. Of like, it's so easy as parents to just try to keep things contained and organized and like prevent the mess, because the mess is always there anyway. Why make it worse, right? Like, why don't poke your eye out at the zoo, please, with that stick, you know? So this is a needed message. And it's
just fun. Yeah, it's fun, just like you wanted it.
Well,
to
and
be.
that's been one of the coolest things is like to see that inspire. Like we've had a lot of parents that are like, yeah, we did a crazy pizza night, like that we as a family then just let our kids put whatever they wanted to onto a pizza. And I was like, that's really cool. And I think that, you know, if we can, the thing for me, there's like this sort of North Star for me whenever I see something, and it could be anything. It could be I read a poem, I watch a documentary, I read a book, or I see something out in the world, and when I interact with that thing, and there's this something inside of me that's like, I want to make something now. Like it makes me want to create something. That's the best stuff for me. And so if I can make something that makes another person actually, like the best thing that it could ever happen with this book is that you read it and then you put it down. And then you go hang out with your kids or make a crazy pizza or wrestle with them, or, like that you take the spirit of the book. I don't need you to keep reading the book. Like, that's great. Read it once and then go be with your kids. Like, that's the best thing that can happen for me, is that it inspires you to go make a crazy memory of your own with your kids.
Super cool. I love it.
Awesome.
All right, Kyle. Well,
treat.
Thank you so much for jumping on with us. Thank you.
I think we need to order some late night pizza, like college days. Like I kind of have like this mood, like wouldn't that blow the kids' minds if you're like, we're ordering a pizza.
It's a business expense at this point. I mean, you're on a call. It's a business expense, tax deduction.
Yeah, I like it.
It is.
I like it.
Every pizza you ever order now can be a business expense.
I'm gonna have to agree with you on that. I can't. I'm not a lawyer, but that sounds right to me.
Yeah.
But you do write legal copy in your book, so.
Yeah.
All right, Kyle. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah. Best of luck with the book. Wishing you all the best on what's next, and everyone buy this book, A Pizza with Everything.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks, Ryan, for chiming in the comments, and everybody else, and Steve for buying a copy. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us.
All right. Thanks, Kyle. Take care.